lost our banter. We started our banter, but it was on the hold screen, and I don't remember.
Were we muted? Maybe they all heard. Oh.
No, we were muted, so we have to go back and recreate the banter.
Okay,
but the banter was before we started the communism.
I don't even remember what we were talking about.
I don't know. We've talked a lot about communism.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking about Solzhenitsyn, but
Solzhenitsyn. I'm not Russian.
Solzhenitsyn. I feel like, I don't know. I feel smarter saying it with the short I, like more professorial. I could be completely wrong though. I don't know.
Just gotta learn Russian on Duolingo. Because after they take Ukraine, they're coming for us next, and we'll all be speaking Russian by the end of the decade.
There's probably a watch list on the FBI for anyone learning Russian on Duolingo. Yeah. It's just, nope, we automatically know that you're a defector. You must love Putin. Gosh, I just want to learn Russian.
Just to be ready, I have a source inside the White House. Putin will be taking over by the end of next year. You heard it here first. Anyways. That's not our subject for today. I thought also that might be disinformation.
That may be disinformation.
It very well might be, but I'll leave that up to the viewers to decide.
Well, you're fear-mongering about Vladimir Putin, so if anything, we're going to get boosted on YouTube now. So there you go. Now you can share with your friends and family, and it'll actually go really far because we've clicked into the disinformation wheel. So welcome. Sorry, I didn't know if you were going to run for it. You did it once. I was just expecting it again. Welcome to another Unauthorized Caucus. It is Thursday. Pardon me, my nose is itchy. It's allergy season. It's noon, and it's time for another Unauthorized Caucus. And if you were on the email list, you already got a little bit of a hint about what we were going to talk about today. But if you're not on the email list, you can fix that. How can they fix it?
phyllisschlafly.com. Plug in your email. You'll get all the goodies. You'll see whenever we're streaming. You'll get all our other emails that we send out. And after each show each week, you'll get a few links covering the things we talked about, and you can share those with your friends, with your family, and share this show right now to anybody else listening.
Yeah, like, share, and subscribe wherever you are on YouTube. Make sure hit the big red button and then the little notification bell, and then dive in there to the comments or the chat. Start chatting it up with folks who are in today. Talk to us, and you will not be disappointed because we definitely have a lot going on down there sometimes, and we always try to respond to what's happening. But also, most importantly, like Mason said, you'll get the resource email, which we're going to talk about a few links, different things that you are going to want to go and get a hold of after the show. And we're going to send you an email this evening once we've collected all of those and send it off to you. So you want to be on the email list for that. But we've got a really big topic today. And I say a big topic. We're only going to cover like a little part of it. We're going to kind of dive in. But as we talk about the topics of choice here, not just let's talk about a news headline and kind of run the gambit just obligatorily. What's something that we can get into that matters and that is important for everyone to understand, and then to just continue down that rabbit hole of understanding more about it. And the breakdown of the family unit in America, I can't think of a more pressing and more all-encompassing topic right now, because the echoes of that are happening across our institutions. And it's because it's the people who are making that long march across the institutions who are actually doing it to us. So I think we got a multi-part thing in our future here. We want to talk a little bit about this in the future.
Right. The family's super important. Aristotle says the family is the fundamental unit of society. I mean, the family is the smallest section of government that exists. It's the first building block. I mean, people govern themselves, but then people exist within families, and then those families work together and build up into communities, and those communities build up into a polis, and then that builds up into a state, and that's how we have society. That's how we're able to communicate with each other. So when the left tears out the family, they are tearing down the most fundamental aspect we have of our social relation to one another, and that threatens the whole of society.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, it is the first. It's been recognized throughout history, and it was set down and created as the first formative, not formative. The word has escaped my brain. the first institution.
It is the first formative place.
It is the first formative place, but the first institution set down by God in the Genesis account. He, before anything else, there was no civil government, there was no church government, there was family, though. He created the family unit. This is the first institution, and it is the building block of all of the others. So it makes sense if you're going to tear down institutions that have built up and progressed us into this point of liberty and prosperity that we have in America. Where would we go and attack? Do you prune the limbs or do you kill the roots? And that's exactly what we've seen happen. I think that that's the case that we're going to make, and we're going to talk about the different shoots of that, or offshoots of that, and different places it's happened specifically. But today we're going to start with us deep down here in the home base. We're going to talk about manhood. And of course, you see this bright red book sitting right here. We'll go ahead and flash this up there. This is not just us that are, talking about this issue, talking about masculinity in America. There are people finally coming out and not just saying, masculinity is not toxic, blah, 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 but actually putting down the blueprint of, well, what does masculinity look like? What does manhood look like? What, where have we come from? Where are we going? And I think that Josh Hawley has set down a really good blueprint. There's a lot of other people who are communicating that as well. And I think we need to dive into it. And then coming up here, we would like to probably dive into femininity and womanhood or the same thing, womanhood, femininity, but dive into fatherhood and motherhood and all of these different things, because each of these, make no mistake, has been very specifically targeted in society, whether it's fatherhood and family courts, motherhood and big government and abortion, the masculinity and culture. I feel like each one of these things has very specifically been risen up against. So it's worth talking about in its entirety.
Right. And because we are men, we are experts on manhood, along with everything else. And that does kind of mean we're screaming into the void of about 3.5 billion others that are experts on the same subject, but you came to us. So yeah, Hawley's book is very solid on this. It really is
let the internet reflect the sarcasm of that, by the way, just so we're abundantly clear. Go ahead.
Okay.
Mansplain Josh Hawley to me. That's the most redundant thing I can think of. Do it. Give it to me.
Yeah. Well, Josh Hawley, he's trying to.
Well, first of all, can we define something really fast?
A man?
What is a man? Matt, what's a man?
Adult human
Matt Walsh,
male.
an adult human male.
Easy.
An adult human male. Well, I don't want to spoil it, so I'm not going to give the last line. No, I just before we dive in, can we make one really fast point? So I made this comment in the description that went out in the email, and also here in the description of the episode, but I would very specifically lay blame at the foot of neo-Marxists for attacking the family in America as we know it. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Now, we just talked about this before the camera went on, but I want to make sure we define these terms, and I'm actually going to put this out there because everyone needs to understand where this is coming from. This ties into all the other things across education and everything else. What's a neo-Marxist? Give me your fast definition.
Well, neo-Marxism comes from Marxism and originally, which was the economic theories based on dialectical materialism, that the proletariat will rise up. We've heard the whole story over and over again, but then people realize, Marx, this wasn't working at all. I mean, not even Lenin really liked it that much, and everybody started adding their own tweaks to it. And then everybody abandoned the economic side of it and just took it into the social institutions like the Frankfurt School and the New School and all the academics in the U.S. after World War II. These are the neo-Marxists, these people who are applying Marxist ideology and Marxist epistemology into these other disciplines, trying to uproot what has come before and trying to progress things forward. We see this in sociology. We see this in psychology through Freudianism, Freudo-Marxism. They fuse together for that. We see this in philosophy, and we see this in all the arts as well. Neo-Marxism is infecting everything. And just as Marx wanted to upturn what has come before of bourgeois capitalism, neo-Marxism wants to upturn the institutions that have come before in whatever domain that it's working within, which on a societal level means the family unit. And it also means Christian civilization, because those things dovetail together quite nicely. It's very hard to have one without the other. Because as Ryan described, the family and Christianity go together. God created the family first. Right. So that is how neo-Marxism relates to this situation. And they do it under the guise of things like liberation and freedom, and we want all this repression, especially once you incorporate the Freudianism, we want repression to be released, and we want this restrictive Christian civilization and this evil, masculine, patriarchal culture to just get out of here. And they think that'll make people happy because they're able to do what they want. But I think it was Chesterton that said, don't tear a fence down if you don't know why it was put there. It's a lot easier to tear down institutions than it is to break them.
Yeah, and that's, the whole point of critical theory. We hear critical race theory, but make no mistake, there's critical theory, like you said, about everything. This critical theory is to tear down the institutions of the past that were, but in the Western world, we're all built upon Judeo-Christian values. We have to get rid of those before anything else can be achieved, which it's not utopia, it's power that we get to achieve. So I wanted to be abundantly clear about who the perpetrators are, because that argument in and of itself is just something that the media hurls conspiracy theorist at you for anymore. If you even breathe the word cultural Marxism or neo-Marxist, it's just, those right-wing conspiracy theories. No, these are real philosophies that are set down. They have a history. There's a paper trail. There are people who've put this together and adapted this kind of tearing down of specifically Christian institutions across society here in America. So Paul Kengor is one of the historians that I most appreciate on this. You're familiar with Paul, right? No? Grove City College. We have him on the Pro America Report sometimes. He's been to our collegians programs. He's done a lot of work. I think The Devil and Karl Marx, talking about the march through institutions in America. He does a great job putting it together and saying, no, this neo-Marxist, neo meaning new, different than the old neo-Marxism, the 20th century version, neo-Marxism, cultural Marxism, these are not myths. These are not right-wing conspiracies. It's real, and it's very active in America. I'm going to include some of those links in the resource email, because as we talk about, which we're about to dive in here, manhood and womanhood, fatherhood, motherhood, as we go into the family and examine this and what it ought to be, and how it's specifically being attacked in America, how we respond, we need to understand who the enemy is, because that's the biggest thing. You have to know your enemy, and as much as they'll try to convince you it's a fabrication of some right winger, it's not. There's no myth to it. It's real people. So we're going to include some of those as well.
They have literally written books and said, we hate these things, and you can go buy those books on the internet, and you can find their articles, and they have websites, and we're just repeating what they're saying about themselves and their opinions.
Yep, absolutely right. So I'm sorry, I stopped you. We were about to, though, get into Holly and get into his book. So
Holly
hit me.
Holly is providing an antidote towards the demasculinization. There are a lot of words you could use for that.
There are, toward the destruction of masculinity.
Yes. Okay, that's a good description. So it's an antidote toward destruction of masculinity that we've been facing for a few decades, and it's just, as long as I've been alive, I've seen it get worse and worse. And he does that by first going through the first section of his book, goes kind of through the fundamentals of manhood. The man is somebody who fights, somebody who has a mission, somebody who has duties, and then applies that in different situations, like husband, father, etc. But it's important to focus down at the most fundamental level of what a man's duty on this earth is, because we joke the Matt Walsh that a man is a human male, but a man is so much more than that. Just a woman is so much more than that, than just the biological and social signifiers that are there to describe it. A man is created for a purpose,
right?
And he goes back to Genesis a lot, and I think that's a good place to go, because God created man, and then not only that, but he created man to have dominion earth over the animals, and God created man in his own image. Man is in the image of God, the creator, so man is there to take what he has dominion over and transform it, and to do things.
And I was going to say, one of the, I don't we'll take this opportunity. Again, we say an antidote. I mean, I would argue very definitively that Holly is giving an antidote for where we are. You could argue different ways of where we go forward, but he is giving the history,
right?
Because the biblical account, in our minds, and I think correctly so, the accurate account, going all the way back to Genesis to Adam. That have fallen into hedonism, essentially, the self pleasure, self love, which, I mean, that I don't know what else could describe our TikTok multi-pronoun culture than that. Do what makes you feel good, however, and it changes. It changes because it's not constant. But he does a job that I thought that, when you look at the Genesis account, the Garden of Eden, God creating man in his own image, you think about even throughout, pagan culture and different brands of everything, man has constantly in temples. What do? You set up images. You set up these representations or reflections, supposedly. Well, what did God do? God created his garden, this perfect place with wilderness around it that man was to tame, and in it he this reflection of him. So we are to reflect the character and the attributes of God. And as we look through the biblical story, what you see is, again, this all-powerful, being that takes dominion, but also has love and mercy and care and, all these other things to it. There's this very diverse personality, this range of things, including emotion, but also logic, all these things that we have. So it's really interesting to see him set down from the very beginning. If that's our job, then there's a whole range of what we would call strong manhood and masculinity, and he kind of marches forward into that. And it's a very different picture than what's being painted by people who are pushing back. And I know we're going to try to keep this to 30. This topic is deserving of more than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
In fact, this may be something we want to pull on some guests for and do more on manhood, multiple episodes, and maybe multiple episodes on womanhood, on mothers, on fathers, on the family unit. I think that might be interesting, but I'm trying to figure out how to accelerate through this. I mean, but at the end of the day, what he's suggesting, and I know a lot of others are, is there is a growing understanding that masculinity and manhood and womanhood and femininity are broken, but we have to come up with the right answer to it. And there are a lot of people who are correctly seeing the problem and then coming up with an absolutely equally incorrect answer to the correct problem. And I would say that we're starting to see a pretty strong rise of that. I mean, you're coming straight out of the college world, a lot closer than I am, and in a conservative college world. What would you say is this an issue that's being talked about among young people, and what is the response? Like, are you finding a return toward what Holly is describing as a biblical, like, sacrificial masculinity, sacrificial leadership, or toward the macho culture, like, which I didn't say that the machismo alpha male personality is a response to the correct problem, but an incorrect response. That's not true masculinity either. So I wonder, like, what are we seeing with young people? I'm sorry if I'm derailing our conversation. But I'm curious.
Well, as most questions towards me about the contemporary American college, it's Hillsdale College, the greatest college on earth. It's different than everything else.
Sing the alma mater song, or you can't.
I've only heard it once.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's not. Anyways,
okay, fine.
Yeah, Hillsdale's different because it's not a big state school where these issues are on ground zero of the elite university.
Well, and that's why I'm curious, because your experience is what I would call moderately more reasonable than just the regular state universities, which are at this point pretty much abandoned to sin, like done. So on a campus where this is actually kind of in consciousness, what are you seeing as the answers, more than the people recognize the problem at Hillsdale? What answers are you seeing at Hillsdale to this, or is this just not on people's radar? That's why I'm kind of curious.
Right. Well, I see three primary issues. It is on people's radar. We see at Hillsdale, we saw the world around us and saw how we were different, and saw how it was important to be different. So I saw three primary answers. There was first there was the very macho kind of like Andrew Tate-esque. Nobody was too much like that, but I'm going to be cool and I'm going to sleep with a lot of girls and that kind of stuff. And that's one answer that people had, which I don't think is the best answer, of course. But then there were the two others, which are more interesting, and I don't know if either of them are completely right. I think both of them have aspects of the truth. There was very much the service pit. I'm going to be humble and I'm going to be a servant and just going to be like a whimsical fellow that's wholesome and everything, and which are good things. It's good to have a true tenderness of heart, but if you only have this kind of tenderness of heart, and that's your entire personality, it can come across as not as masculine as traditional simplicity. Even though sure you're checking the boxes of what makes a very good Christian, but sometimes that means you're just going to get walked over. And I think that another answer on campus was, I don't want to say in the middle because I think there's its own thing, but Christianity and I think the much so warrior aspect and strength that comes along with Christianity and comes along with Christian masculinity, and emphasizing strength and power as you develop yourself as a Christian man. And I think that is the best answer I've seen. I mean, I think that has issues. I think sometimes I think there has to be a balancing between strength and power, and going up and conquering. You have to balance that with turning the other cheek, and with being honest and being and being willing to be a servant, leader, while also being unwilling to take crap from other people. Yeah. Long-winded way to answer your question, but those are the three main ones I saw.
No, that's all right, and that's what I was kind of curious about. I know that there's a lot of different ways that we are approaching this, as this problem is now being seen. It's been talked about. By the way, someone is letting me know that we might be having some audio issues today. If we are, I apologize. No, it's not you.
Hello?
Based on our audio issues, I'm not sure that was the right way to do it. No, I'm kidding. But if it sounds like we might have a connection issue. So if it's all choppy, I do apologize. If it's that bad, I'll put up a solid recording of this, and we'll go that direction. So I wonder if that's why our chats are empty today. Even of the normal people, we're all quiet now. But
they have no idea what we're saying.
Well, that's a high possibility. Although I'm listening to you in the same room, I'm kidding. That's interesting. That's good. And I think that there's a lot of good ones out there. I'll give a shout out to another book that I didn't bring because I haven't started it yet. But there's a book called The Warrior Poet Society out of Georgia. I think it started kind of just in the Second Amendment, advocacy, prepared citizenry world, but it has morphed because the guy in charge of it, former Army Ranger, has all of the bona fides for tactical door kicking and guns and stuff like that, has really kind of stretched out to the idea of no, I'm a Christian. Here's the way that I understand the warrior poet mentality, is that being a man, much like our mighty warrior God who's also full of mercy and grace, is these two different parts. I need to be fully this and fully this. I have to be intuitive and loving of my family and my fellow neighbor, and meek, mild, and and humble. But meek is not weak.
Right.
Mild is not mousy, and humble is not incapable. Like, I am capable of all of these great and dangerous things in defense of the right reasons. But there's a very full, well-rounded. And that's actually, Hawley makes the same. His whole case, which you said it to begin with, he describes where we are at the beginning of man's mission, the promise of manhood, but then he breaks it down. What is a man? He actually, I was going to go into the whole thing because you should buy his book and read it. Go get the audio, go get it from your library. But he breaks it down. What is a man? Oh, a husband, father, warrior, builder, priest, and king. And he goes into each of these things. It is a very well-rounded, and I feel like we're seeing offshoots try to define one or two of those, but it really is an understanding of a very full range of not just accomplishments. May just be on YouTube something. Yeah, let me know, by the way. Let me know if your audio is bad. Audio is difficult to hear. It comes across as choppy. I'm clear, but not the guest. Oh, you're the guest.
I'm the guest?
You're the guest.
I've been here.
No, you haven't made much of an impression. Yeah, move that microphone up. I don't know. Maybe it is just you. But thank you for bearing with us. I'm sorry. I'll do a repost and I'll send it out on the email list. If you're not on the email list, you won't get it. You'll be stuck with that audio version, Ryan and Mason. But Ryan and the guest. But there is a very full. Don't get used to your office. There is a very full range of accomplishments, attributes, and different things. Whether it's Hawley's version, or John Lovell's version, or Ben Shapiro, or Malcolm. There's another interview that we're going to put in the voice notes that you really want to get hold of. There's a lot of different things to well-round and in America. And I feel like that is incredibly important for young men to go and look and understand, okay, masculinity is not toxic, but what is masculinity? This whole, yes, it's toxic, that's obviously just a misapplied one section. That's missing something. But likewise, to your point, this weak and mild, we're missing something without anything else. There is a huge gap of understanding that we need to make up here in the understanding of what's happening and where we are. I apologize if I got really quiet. My ear just popped, and all of a sudden I realized I was like yelling. But there are a lot of resources that we need to consume, and this is something that's just I think this isn't just for like you and me to figure out and go off on self-help. This is something that men need to learn. Men need to encourage other men to learn. That women need to know. You need to read this book, young ladies, if you're looking for a husband, or if you're a married woman, read this book, because the expectations ought to be. Churches and church leaders ought to be looking at what the expectations ought to be, and building that into people. I mean, we all need to understand what a man is, what masculinity is, not just what it isn't. And I think that because that's, what's the old adage at the bank? They don't teach you how to spot counterfeit bills. They teach you by looking at the real bill so much that you just know the counterfeit. You see it. I don't have to look at the fake. I study the real, and then I know the fake when it happens. Right. I think that is incredibly important. Not Mason, but the person on the phone. Okay. No, I'm confused now. You're not the guest. To be clear, Good. You are not the guest. She knows.
Do we have a guest?
I don't know. We might have a guest.
Is there a ghost?
It's possible. It's possible. A third voice is coming through the screen, but there's a full picture to be had, and it is a truth that we need to understand and study and recognize, and there's no other way to return to wholeness, away from this brokenness that we've been, it's been foisted upon us across the institutions, across all of America, by Marxism. If we don't understand the path to truth and look at it, I think this is an incredibly important topic. And I keep pointing to this. This is my physical copy of something that's sitting here in front of me. But there are a lot of good people having this conversation, fleshing it out. What does that mean all the way down from a biblical perspective, from a civic perspective, from family perspective? There's a lot of good people. I'm going to put some links down below, things that you should go and look at and check out. So I say down below, his email. That's where you're going to find him. But, I think I don't think that there is a more important topic.
Right.
Perhaps another great awakening, a complete spiritual return in America. If we don't get the family right, we don't build any of the rest. I mean, maybe temporarily put a Band-Aid on it. At that point, like, you've still not structurally fixed the dam or the bridge or filling your metaphor. The structural damage is still there, and it's being held together.
Right. Nothing else works if the family doesn't work.
So I think that this is a very important conversation. We kind of talked a little bit about manhood today. We've hit the 30-minute mark here, so we'll go ahead and wind it down. But we've introduced the concept. I know that you all have gotten used to this. Sometimes we get on stuff that really just needs to be talked about in the news. Other times we are diving into a big topic that needs to be solved, because as conservatives, we need to be thinking of it. So let us know. Who would you like to hear from? What kind of conversations would you like to have? Because we're not the star power big podcast people who pull on multi-million-dollar guests and everything else. But we have very thoughtful conversations here. Your participation is incredibly key in that, jumping in and talking to us about things. What thing would you like us to talk about, from manhood, from womanhood, from fatherhood, from motherhood? What would you like us to dive into more and have more of a conversation on? Let us know, because I'd like for this to be the beginning series. I think it's important, because a young husband with a young dad. You're a young husband, not a dad just yet, but this is important to us both, and I think that this is something that we all need to be really concerned about. So I say concerned about finding the answer, not just worried about the thing that's going on. So let us know. Sound off, shoot us an email, info@phyllisschlafly.com. Chime off here in the comments in the chat. And of course, also send us a direct message on any social media. Phyllis Schlafly Eagles across the board, Real PS Eagles on Twitter. You know where we are. If you're watching us here, hit the reply button and tell us what you'd like us to talk about in this series. I'd like to build this out.
Yep.
So
thanks so much.
Yeah. thanks for being with us. And go sign up for the emails so you don't miss the resource one tonight. It's going to be pretty full. And then Mason hasn't even sent me his stuff yet, so you don't miss it. Go sign up, phyllisschlafly.com. And we will see you next Thursday for another Unauthorized Caucus at noon. And we will have a lot of exciting things to talk about next week. I already have the plan. Awesome. We'll see you all.